Okay, so welcome to episode 3 of Compelling and Rich. Marc McLaughlin here asking a lot of the questions today.
And Mark Reid joining him.
Hopefully filling me with knowledge. So today's episode is based around myself and my partner's holiday to Las Vegas. We had talked about how things we'd like to do in our lives. We were actually away on holiday at the time we were talking this, and we'd mentioned doing Vegas, because you should at some point in your life. I will do Vegas. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, probably January blues, I was like, do you know what? You say you should do Vegas. I've got 0% interest in my credit card and I've got space. We can't really afford this to now, but if we pay it off through the year, let's just do it. We'll book Vegas, give us something to build towards for the summer. We'll be that stereotypical British couple and have that and work towards that. And it's finally happening. So on Tuesday, in 4 days' time, we fly out. And in the past 5 months, I've been speaking to people that have often said, oh, Vegas is great, you should do this, you should do that. My barber had been there last year and he was telling me about things. Aunties and uncles and sisters had said, try this is good. So what I thought I'd speak to my good friend Dr. Reid, who has been to Las Vegas, and you never really get a chance to sit and actually ask all the questions, get all the information from beginning to end. You only get snippets of, do this, don't do this, try this, don't try that. We did this, you might like it. So essentially, that's what I'm doing here. So my first question is going to be, when did you do this and what were the reasons that brought you to doing Vegas?
It's a little bit backward from what most people think. I'm just listening to you talking about it there and it's bringing back a lot of good memories. So I'm happy to hear that you're doing it and you're essentially saying, screw it, let's do it while we can. Yeah. Because it's absolutely the right move. If it's within your means, go for it. I said it's a little bit backward in terms of our reasons for going. So I went with my wife, Amanda, and we went for our honeymoon just after we got married. Most people would expect that I would go there maybe for my stag do or bachelor party for the debauchery that Vegas is often stereotyped with. But we went there for reasons of stuff that we were interested in that I'll come to. But one of the most interesting things up front was it wasn't originally in our plan to do it. Around the time that we were booking our honeymoon, so late 2014, for getting married in 2015, our original idea and big dream for the pair of us was to go on an African safari.
Nice.
And around the time that we were booking that, going into the travel agents to find out about it, what country we might go to and how we might do it, it was just off the peak of the Ebola crisis. So there was the possibility to go, we could still live that dream, but things got a little bit sketchy when halfway through the discussion with the travel agent, she had to put on the loudspeaker and one of our colleagues would come on and essentially read out a disclaimer to us saying that you can go to Africa, you can go to country X, but because we're just coming off of this crisis with Ebola that's now controlled, the risk is in your hands. Right, okay. At which point we thought, we're going to have to throw in the towel here, come up with plan B, and leave that for another time. So that still remains on the cards, but it was only because of that we then started to think about Vegas. And that's when we asked the travel agent about it, oh, is that a possibility? And for us, the reason that Vegas was on the cards was we are both really into theatre and going to theatre, and we do that a lot in Glasgow and going to the cinema as well. And we'd always heard that theatre was like that on steroids. Yeah. Being able to go and see the biggest, best, highest value shows all in this one strip, that's what really sold it for us. And so we went ahead and booked it. And when you're talking about having various snippets of conversations with people, it was after we booked it, we started talking to my aunt and uncle who had been there before they started a family. And as soon as you tell them and other people that you're going to Vegas, having been there themselves, they just poured out all of their knowledge, as I'm getting the chance to do with you now. And for them, it was the same as it has been for me at the start of this conversation. Hearing the fact that you're about to go just fills me with the memory and excitement of having been there and hoping that you can enjoy it as much as I did. So yeah, it was a theatre that drew us there.
If I can jump in quickly, so I was this is what I think that is really interesting you saying that, because we decided to go, and when you tell people, as you're saying, like your aunt and uncle jumped on giving you their experience, that's why I'm having this chat with you, say. But the people have always jumped on, are you going to get married? And that was it. Obviously you're going for honeymoon, so that option's not there, but I'd say every person, if not 3 out of 4, have said to us straight away, we Whitechapel, you're going to come back for a ring on you, all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that hadn't crossed my mind at all. And it's like, it's not that, it's basically not in the plans. This is just adding pressure to myself now that I'm saying this. And I totally assume when you say to people I'm going to Vegas, they would straight away go, oh, the gambling, the casinos, the debauchery, the hangover. And to me, it's the same as you, it's the theatres and the shows. I'd say I actually feel terrible thinking, I'm not sure what my partner's drive is. My partner's drive is, I've said I want to go to Vegas. I imagine she's excited about it. But she's very much, I think, into the spectacle of like the strip. Like she wanted to stay in the hotels that are like what I call gaudy hotels. Like I'm very much like probably boring and thinking like that's below me. I'm some kind of snob who can earn his right as a snob. But she's into all of that spectacular, the spectacles which she's into in life. The theatre and the shows is what I'm excited about. But I assumed everyone would be right on the gambling aspect of it. Yeah. So the fact that you're saying it was the shows that drew you is really interesting as well.
And it was certainly the main thing, but we would be lying if the others weren't part of the draw. So earlier in our relationship, one of the first things that we did on a works night out was be in a casino together in Glasgow.
Right, of course,
So we had played things like blackjack and poker and roulette. Yeah. And for us, being able to go and do that in Vegas was like tying it to the nostalgia of those early memories of our relationship. So gambling was definitely part of it because it had been part of our own story, which we really liked. And although it was too late for us to get married, I think one really interesting thing for people who are maybe toying with the idea is you can still do that sort of thing, but not formally get married. So we... In the end, we didn't have time, but we toyed with the idea that you can go through the pomp and ceremony of it to say that you've been in the Little White Chapel, or that Elvis has married you, or you've left the chapel and got spanked in the ass by a dwarf who happens to be employed there. Who knows why?
Also just like a kind of almost like a photo shoot sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly, a photo shoot sort of thing. So you can do that, or you can do it formally and get properly married, the way a lot of us saw Ross and Rachel stumble out in that famous Friends episode. So you could do it one way or the other. So it was the theatre, a little bit about the gambling, and toying with the idea of the wedding ceremonies as well. So back to the theatre being the main draw. So it was to take all the Glasgow theatre that we'd done and see it on a much grander scale. So when we booked to go to Vegas, we actually booked one show at the same time.
Through your travel agent?
Yeah, so we didn't realise we could do that, so that's something people can do. And at the time, our options of many led us to book a Michael Jackson tribute experience, which I'll come back to later. So we booked Vegas and we went out with one solid booking. But in the end of the 7 days that we'd been there, we went to see 3 shows. And it was really the second of the 3 shows that ties the love of theatre and the draw of Vegas to the more obvious draw of gambling. So it was a fork in the road just to get to Vegas, but there was another fork in terms of booking that second show. So we were staying at the Monte Carlo Hotel and Casino. So that's right in the middle of the strip, if people look for it, which was a great location. All of the hotels are pretty much 4 and 5 stars, so it's hard to go wrong. And in the Monte Carlo, that's when we realised, checking in and talking to the receptionist, that all the hotels will have their show. They will have their centrepiece, their attraction, their mainstay that have shows running nightly. And in the Monte Carlo, it was Blue Man Group.
Right, okay.
Which was, for those who don't know Blue Man Group, it's three similarly looking gentlemen, all dressed in blue, no hair, completely silent. I'll come back to the show in a second. But we found out it was Blue Man Group in Monte Carlo, but we didn't commit to going to that right away. We were still getting used to the fact that a lot of the ticket prices in Vegas were going to be a little bit higher than we expected. So we were trying to find our feet first before that. So we knew it was there, but we didn't buy tickets. But what we did do was go into the casino that was connected to the hotel and is connected to all the hotels. And that was when those memories of being in the casino together in Glasgow came flooding back for us. So we were up for a flutter. We wanted to play a little game. So we played a little bit of blackjack, but the main one that drew us back was actually roulette.
Right.
So with a little bit of the dollars that we had stuffed in our wallets and purses, we put a little bit of money on the table. Didn't get very far until one of the rolls brought home 00.
Right.
Green 00, which we had some chips on. And I can't remember how much, but we got back about $150. So we're $150 up.
So I'm not a gambler. We
Uh-huh.
went to casino recently to try it out, and we were both crap at it. So I am essentially crapping myself going to Vegas with, like, even you saying that. So, like, do you have a rough idea of what you would have put on the table? Like, I'm talking, like, was it as much as $50, as much as 20?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't want to go nuts, and certainly would recommend people to have just a small pot that you're quite happy to burn. If you never see it again, you won't be losing much.
My plan currently is to go in one night with $100, right?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to lose it. I'm happy to play that. But that night we went to casino in Glasgow and we were putting on pound bets next to a guy putting on £50 bets on a roulette number, and it was scary. So I see where that story's going, that you've put money on this and it brought back, like, to me, if you put on a £50 bet, getting 150 is quite good.
Yes.
But was yours maybe like $10, $20 and you put it and you got 150 back, or was it like a $1 bet that really?
The single bets were maybe around $10 and $20, but if you had to add it up like the way you're talking, it was maybe $50 to $100.
Right.
So, you know, if we added it all up, with what we got back, we were around $100 up, which is the main point.
Yeah, definitely.
And at that point, we were mindful enough and, let's call it, sensible enough just to walk away while we were up.
Right, okay.
But that's what led us back to the theatre story, because now we had $100 that we didn't have before. Yeah. No plans on where to spend it. We'd been sensible enough not to burn it back on the roulette table. Mm-hmm. So what we did was go back to reception and ask about Blue Man Group.
Right. So again, I'm going to jump in again.
Yeah,
before you go into Blue Man Group, so my parents went to Vegas many, many moons ago, and when they came back, my dad, who's quite conservative, we say, in his entertainment choices, but basically said to me, probably around about age 12, say, that Blue Man Group, it was weird. You'll like it. But that was based solely off, it was weird. And I was, I guess, a weird child in his eyes. So he said, you'll like Blue Man Group. And actually, when this must have been the early days of YouTube, maybe, but I remember going and watching some of it and thinking, this is weird. What is it? Like, in terms of, because I know it's not a storyline, it's not a story they're putting on like a play. I know it's not a concert.
Yes.
What actually is the show?
Blue Man Group is weird. I would call it a surreal mixture of all of the above.
Like cabaret-ish in terms of mixture, I'm thinking, or variety.
So, as I mentioned earlier, so these three guys are dressed as if they look that way like when a burglar pulls a pair of tights over their head, sort of squashed, rounded faces that are glossy because they've got this sort of blue mask on that makes them all look the same. Almost like little green men, but little blue men, little aliens. Mm-hmm. So they're silent throughout the show, but the show itself is really music driven.
Right, okay.
They're playing a lot of drum based music and other instruments that they themselves have concocted a lot. So a lot of it is drum music, some of it's standard drums, but a lot of it's, you know, pipe work and plumbing and things like that, and things that they've put together. Yeah. And the music drives it. But a lot of that stuff is done with really spectacular visuals as well. Okay. So they'll be smashing a drum and it will have fluorescent paint on it that's going sky high and is well lit and has these strange illusions as the music's playing. Same with playing music on the pipes. They'll be lit in a weird and wonderful way that changes as the music's playing. So it's an absolute assault on the senses of music and visuals and sound, all of that. And it's all done without those guys saying a single word. So it has that sort of modern, spectacular, theatrical show on steroids that we went to Vegas for. And that in a very weird way. But because it was silent, you had this little connection back to the shows of old and the golden age of cinema, like the likes of Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin and silent movie stars. And it had that feel about it, even though it was incredibly modern and far removed from that. It was that little bit of mixture of new and old that made it utterly amazing. And I say that almost waffling and telling you all these things about sounds and music, because to define it is to just throw yourself down a rabbit hole.
Right, okay.
Surreal is the one word I would come back to.
Yeah.
But so worth it.
And
again, it was just a lovely part of being in Vegas. It was another fork in the road where we did one thing, the obvious thing, the gambling,
yes.
and that led us to another show, which was absolutely sublime. Excellent. And that was show 2.
Right, okay, so that's show 2 then.
Yeah.
Let's go through show 1 and 3.
Yeah.
So basically, again, I'll give you my side that we've booked 3 already in advance, actually.
Brilliant.
So, well, sort of. We've booked Penn and Teller, the Magicians, because I am, to be honest, that's probably my drive, is to go and see Penn and Teller. Like, I texted my brother 3 months ago saying I'm going to see Penn and Teller. And he said, oh, that's class. Are they coming to Glasgow or Edinburgh? I was
yes.
like, no, I'm going to them. Because he was a magician when he was younger. So he got me involved in magic, and Penn and Teller were a huge part of that. So that's probably why I'm going. So
Penn and Teller, for folks that don't know, superstar magicians for at least 3 or 4 decades
Definitely. And they're world famous. They're absolute innovators. They break so many rules of magic while still being some of the top magicians on earth.
Yeah.
And they're very entertaining, and I'd highly recommend looking into anything they've done. And we're also going to see the Cirque du Soleil Beatles show. Love. And this comes from my kind of teenage love of the Beatles and interest in Cirque du Soleil and things like that. Kind of again, this heyday of YouTube and seeing things. And then I remember the album, the Love album, came out.
Yeah.
I was like, this is bizarre. They remixed this. Looking into it, it's because of this show. So I had that in my back. So we've booked those 2 shows, and we're also going to a drag brunch at one point, which I don't know much about, but I think you can gather from it. It's free mimosas the entire time you're there, and it's drag queens, and all you can eat. So that's what we've booked so far. But I've had the same mentality as you. When we go, I would probably happily go and see more shows.
Yes.
So these are the one. You booked a Michael Jackson one before you went.
Yeah, that's the one we booked.
Let's start with that. Why?
Well, you can see from the selection that you've raised with the Cirque du Soleil Beatles, Penn and Teller for the magic and the weird and wonderfulness of a drag show. The variety was massive, and the selection that was put in front of us was like that. It was simply one of the things that we were most curious about seeing. Was we'd heard about some of those, like the really top-notch Michael Jackson impersonators, guys who have essentially committed their life to it and really, changed their appearance physically down to the bone to be able to do it. So we knew we were never going to see the real thing, so we thought that was a great thing to do. And the story of getting to see that was another... It's actually in talking to you, I see just how many of these little chance circumstances come up, because although it was the one that we'd booked and secured, it was, of the 3 shows, it was the one that we almost never went to see.
Right, okay.
The reason was a random, unplanned for burst of rain.
Right, wow.
We didn't see it forecast, but being in Vegas in August, which is when we went, it's 40 degrees minimum heat. Right, so it was absolutely sweltering, and I can come back to how we dealt with that later. But on the day that we were going to see the Michael Jackson tribute act, we got near the end of the main part of the strip as we knew it. And between one of the last hotels and the hotel that we were going to, the Stratosphere, there was quite a large gap of buildings where new hotels are being built. It's a little bit more barren. There's just the road and the route to the Stratosphere, and that's when the heavens opened. I mean, and this wasn't Scottish rain, which we are very used to. This was raindrops the size of tennis balls.
Right, okay.
Just we were soaked within seconds.
Wow.
And we managed to find one bus stop about halfway between where we started and the Stratosphere, where the Michael Jackson show was, and we sat there utterly drenched, looking for scuba gear because it was that wet. We had our shoes and socks off, sitting out in the sun when the rain eventually stopped. I'd take my top off and stuff like that. It was just, we were through to the skin, soaking, thinking, we can't go.
Yeah,
We can't possibly
like
go and
this
sit
all night,
in
of
a
course.
theatre and do that. And we were moments away from turning back and not doing it. And I think it was really me that convinced us just to walk for a bit. We'll dry a little bit more by the time we get there. We still probably had a 10 or
after the
15
rain, the
minute
sun
walk.
just came out as if
The sun
nothing
came
had
out
happened.
as if nothing had happened. This was really a 20-minute spell.
Wow, okay.
Over the course of 7 days, 20 minutes, and that was the
Really?
only rain that we saw.
And it was at
the
that
height
one
of
point
August.
where you were nowhere near cover.
Nowhere near
That's
cover.
just- that's luck, isn't
There
it?
was no running, no hiding, like going hiking in the wilderness and looking for somewhere to pee. There was nothing, right? Nowhere to hide, and the rain certainly pissed all over us. But we walked there. We kept going, and that was that fork in the road. We almost turned back, but we were not quite dry by the time we got to the Stratosphere. So, absolutely massive column of a hotel
Right.
that has a sort of dish-shaped top
Is
to
that
it. It's,
kind of-
it's
am I
almost
at
like the
CN Tower or something
yes,
like that?
it's
That's
absolutely, yeah. So you're talking about the building in Seattle, right?
yeah.
So it's very much like that in terms of its shape. So it's this beacon that you're heading for, and we got there, and we were still a little bit hesitant going in, because the thing that's absolutely necessary when you're in Vegas in 40-degree heat at the height of summer is aircon is everywhere. So we come from the 40-degree heat that was drying us into the 20-degree heat of the aircon. So we were uncomfortably damp.
Yeah.
And when we got into the room, the theatre room where the Michael Jackson show was going to be, we had expected it to be like a standard theatre here. But this is one of those cool things that Vegas brought that you see on TV that you don't get to see many other places unless you really look for it. And that was that sort of low-lit, cool jazz-style cabaret room where it was all individual circular tables with candlelight, and that's what's lighting the room, and someone going around from table to table to take your order.
like
So
that.
luckily it was that sort of setup, and our tickets were for one of these tables, which again we didn't know. It was numbered as if it was a normal theatre, but that led us to one of these tables, so we could sort of sit on our own, uncomfortably damp as we were,
So
and,
just the two of you, it
and
wasn't
slowly
like
dry
that. Oh,
off.
brilliant.
Yeah. So
That's-
finally that was what settled us and made us glad that we went to see what we're actually talking about, the show itself. And as a reminder, like, the reason we booked that is because we had this sense that this was someone among impersonators who had completely dedicated themselves to not being themselves, being Michael Jackson. And that was exactly what we saw.
Yeah.
You know, going through the entire obvious back catalogue of Michael Jackson, you know, love him or hate him, the music was utterly spectacular. And to give you an idea of just how immersive it was as an experience of seeing this impersonator, people in the audience were shouting out things like, "We love you, Michael."
Right, really?
They were there, they were seeing Michael Jackson. They weren't seeing an impersonator. They were seeing Michael on the stage as if he was in his prime.
Does he not, maybe acts the right word? I went to see the bootleg Beatles years ago, and they throughout the show refer to themselves as John, Paul, George and Ringo. They make the obvious digs at themselves and they joke about it, but they play the part on the stage.
Yes.
I imagine he's the same. He's not like some impersonators. You go, they're like, "Oh, I'm here and I'm singing the songs of Bruce Springsteen, blah blah blah," and they'll kind of be like, "Oh, but I'm actually this guy."
Yeah.
But he's not being David, whatever his name is. He's being Michael. Is the show like that as well?
Yeah,
The Michael shows were famous.
Yeah, it was quite a large stage, and he had a lot of backup dancers and companion singers and things like that to make it like. For me, my first memory of seeing anything from Michael Jackson was watching an old VHS, and the advert before the movie that I'd rented, showing our age a little bit here, was the entirety of Thriller.
Right, okay.
Right, so it was like a 30-minute ad showing you Thriller.
Amazing.
So it was that level where you could see him, the theatrics of the dress up, and about 20 to 30 backup dancers making it like this one fluid movement. You know, like you see birds flying in the sky. It was like that level of satisfaction when you see dancers acting together as one. But the final thing I'll say in terms of it being that really convincing and immersive nature of a high-level impersonator like that, when you saw the bootleg Beatles, I'm going to guess that when they were George, Paul and Ringo and whatever, they were speaking like they were from Liverpool. They were speaking in those infamous accents. so you had no cause to question it.
No.
They were speaking and acting as if they were the guys, right?
100%.
This guy was speaking like Michael Jackson. He had that sort of infamous, high-pitched, child. I'm not going to do an impression, but just watch an episode of South Park if you want that impression. That high-pitched, childlike tone that he had, and this guy had that. And when he spoke to the audience, that's what invoked those responses, like people saying, "We love you, Michael," and that sort of thing, and cheering for Michael, not cheering for the impersonator. So, from the rain soaking us and thinking we were going to turn back and just go to another casino, that was another decision. We were so glad we stuck with it. So if you're thinking about going to see any show in Vegas, stick with it. Don't back out, don't back down. If you've got an act that you would have loved to have seen but know in your heart of hearts you can never see them because they're either too old or it's beyond their time or they've passed away or they're not touring anymore or whatever, give the impersonators a chance, because the whole point of you going to see them is just to cut away from the worries of your life and see the band that you want to see. And a lot of these impersonators are just fantastic actors that make you believe that you're seeing the people that you will never get a chance to see.
And as you say, the ones in Vegas are the very best.
Absolutely.
That's why this guy has a slot in a hotel in Vegas.
Yeah.
Like, he's not there because he's quite good. He's there because he's as good as you're going to get.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, your Michaels aren't touring, your Freddie Mercurys aren't touring. It's not an option. And you've heard about this guy. I knew about him before you'd waxed lyrical about how great he was. So that's clearly a thing. So moving on, what was show 3 for you then?
Show 3 is a tenuous link to one of the shows that you're going to see. So once we had seen shows 1 and 2 and we were comfortable that we had enough cash, we got right into the flow of it and booked tickets to see show 3, which was one of the many Cirque du Soleil shows. So you're going to see the Beatles version. We went to see one called Ka, K-A-K, which is rooted in Far Eastern culture and folklore. And I might butcher this slightly, but the draw of that is Amanda. So my very first memory of going out with Amanda was the first time I went out to meet her. She was wearing a sort of Oriental style dress. So she's always had an affinity for the Far East and that sort of culture and style and fashion. So of the Cirque du Soleil shows, of which many were running all at once in Vegas, by the way, if you've got a certain flavour of that circus that you want to see, the Far East is what drew us to that for Amanda's sake.
I didn't know that's what I'd seen Ka, but I didn't know that's what it was about.
Yeah,
that's quite interesting.
So in terms of the story, I'll butcher this a little bit, but there's essentially, at its core, I think, if I remember right, there's feuding families, and a lot of it is to do with battles between them, and dances and fight scenes between the characters. But to give you an essence of why a show like that is worth going to see and why this isn't just a circus, the Ka show of Cirque du Soleil was one where several years previous to the one that we saw, one of the cast had lost their life. Someone died during the show.
Yeah, I remember that story. I didn't know that was Ka, but wow.
And that was because someone essentially fell from a height. This gives you a sense of just how grand and large and dangerous these environments can be, and something like the levels that they go to in Vegas and Cirque du Soleil in particular go to create a show that you've never seen before, and they'll make damn sure that you've never seen anything like it. And in Ka, the thing that really caught us off guard and took us aback and made us say wow was the fact that this wasn't a show on a flat stage. This was a show that had a massive gap between the front and the main stage, where you didn't know how deep that hole was going between the gap of you and the stage. So some of the actors in the beginning, as part of the show, would throw themselves over this, presumably onto a safety net, but they were going far down and you couldn't see how deep that was going.
Oh wow.
So I think to tie into that story of the tragedy from a few years previous, there was some miscommunication and there wasn't a safety net for this person, so they fell from a tremendous height to their unfortunate demise. But apart from that gap between you and the stage itself was the first and only one we've ever seen that was not steady. It wasn't a flat stage.
Right.
This was a stage that started horizontal like any other, but during the course of the show, tipped up to being completely and utterly vertical. And on the stage there was sort of TV style panels, LCD screens, so that there was effects and lighting and change of sceneries on the stage, so that instead of you looking directly at the actors on the horizontal stage the way you would be used to at a theatre, you were all of a sudden transported into being at the bird's eye view of what was going on.
Okay.
So the stage comes up and all of a sudden you're looking down onto people. It was almost like looking at Grand Theft Auto on the PC again. Yeah, to have a really weird analogy. But that's the only time I've ever seen that. So a lot of these fight scenes were people, dangling from cables whilst the stage was vertical, whilst the stage was playing all this stuff on the TV screens embedded in the stage, so that we as the audience were weirdly transported into being from a bird's eye perspective. I've never seen it before, never seen it since. It was a perfect example of the amount of money that can be thrown at these shows and how it can make the memory stick in your mind.
Yeah, how far they've gone to create a show that you won't see anywhere else.
Aye, transformative. It was amazing and really, really impressive. So that was the 3 shows. Michael Jackson, the one that we went to see, so an impersonator. Blue Man Group, the surreal musical and visual extravaganza. And the extreme and beautiful circus, which was Cirque du Soleil and Ca.
Excellent. So that's the choices of your shows. How did you take it back to the beginning of your journey as a travel agent? I'm going to ask about your hotel, because when I looked into this, first of all, we had a budget, and I was like, we're doing Vegas, we'll do it properly. Yeah. Again, it's all going on your credit card, so we don't have the money, but let's do it properly. So I budgeted for this, that, and the next thing, and we thought, well, Bellagio, MGM, Caesars, right? That's what we're going to do. If you're going to do Vegas, let's just do it. Yeah. So I made up a wee spreadsheet, and I had my tables all laid out for even like their cheapest but nicest rooms and all that. So we went into the travel agents, which I haven't been in for years because the internet's taken over everything. I've always just booked my own flights, but I thought, well, travel agent,
old
this
school.
And I sat down and I said, the guy was chatting away about this at Vegas, blah blah, flights, times, dates, and I said, so my workings, and I'm thinking I know what I'm talking about to a travel agent here. Bring out my phone and I show him my plans, my budgets, and he went, yeah, okay. Yeah, with your budget, you could stay in one of those hotels, yeah. You cannot fly to Las Vegas and stay in those hotels. You cannot fly home from Las Vegas on that budget. But you're damn right you could stay in those for a couple of days, son. And that was me put firmly in my place. But that was my mentality, was, if we're doing it, I want to do it properly.
Right.
So here's where I want to look. And I was blown out of the water within 10 minutes. So how did you guys settle on your hotel and choose? Because there's a variety of options. I think I've said that my partner was saying, can we stay in New York, or that's the Excalibur, and she sent me a photo of it.
Yes.
I was like, that's the castle from Mario 64.
Yes, it is.
It's amazing. And I was like, I would love to look at that.
Yeah. And
I would not love to spend a week in that. I think I'm just probably too boring or conservative myself now. I'm turning into my father. That the idea of New York being rebuilt in fiberglass, I would like to see it, but it doesn't appeal to me, and it really appeals to her. So I was trying to be like, no, I want to stay in these hotels, that hotel. How did your decision come about for the Monte Carlo?
So budget was part of it.
Yeah.
Location was another. So, we were going into our honeymoon. We'd had a bit of money set aside for it. So, we had enough to get there, a hotel, and get back, to use your analogy and way of looking at it. But it was certainly, to your point, a little bit more expensive than we thought. So again, Vegas is something that I can only recommend with my heart of hearts, but do it when you've got the budget to do it, so that you can do it right, or do it in such a way that you know that you can pay it off. Budget was one, location was another. Probably from our circumstance then, it was location driven. Monte Carlo was one of those main hotels that we'd heard about. It was great value. It was quite high end. I think it was, I might have mentioned earlier, but most of those hotels in the main part of the Strip are 4 or 5 star. I think Monte Carlo was a 4, I can't quite remember, and it may well have changed. The bottom line was, it was more than good enough.
Right, okay,
It was bloody spectacular, and I don't think it might not have been as expensive as some of the really famous ones.
Yeah.
But to your point about Excalibur, New York, MGM, Luxor even, which is another spectacular one to look at. Unless you're going for the really high-end rooms and you want to spend a hell of a lot of time in there, I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about which of the hotels that you're in. Right. A lot of the time that we were in Vegas, we spent walking up and down the Strip, visiting these places for the spectacular of having a photograph next to this caricature and condensed version of New York that was sitting on the corner of the Strip and just looked like a cartoon in real life, or going over to the Mario 64 Palace that was at Excalibur and seeing these massive swords and that sort of Arthurian thing.
You only see photos.
No, these look like real life cartoons. Right. They are as ridiculous as you would imagine, in the most impressive and spectacular way. And you know, Amanda's personal favourite was Luxor, which is the Egyptian themed, genuinely pyramid shaped hotel, which is all black glass on the outside, and it's got a large column pillar with something approaching the Lynx.
Right, okay.
Sorry, not the Lynx, the Sphinx.
Right, okay,
the Sphinx,
I want to start what you're going for there.
Yeah, excuse me. So the Sphinx, and that grandeur of Egyptian life and ancient Egyptian culture. We went to visit all of them, we walked around them, we went into the hotels of each of them, we could get all the pictures that we wanted, see the grandeur of each of them. It wasn't necessary for us to stay there. And you know, Monte Carlo had its own part of that as well, but yeah, I wouldn't spend too much time worrying about that, because ultimately you're not really, if you're like us, I guess like most folks, you're not going to spend all of your time in the hotel room. Brilliant weather, lots to see in Vegas, you're going to visit a lot of places. The Strip is massive, it takes a long time to walk it, and there's plenty to do. So I wouldn't place as much value on the room that I'm staying in as you might think.
Yeah, did you walk a lot? Again, I think another thing that I heard is people saying take taxis here, there and everywhere. There's a monorail, taxis are a huge thing. Some actually said, I think it was online there, they were saying just get a limo at one point. Like, fuck. Like, there's all the, I think getting the taxis from the airport to the your hotel, and they were like, it's going to be like $15, but get a limo. Why not? Like, it's good crack. It's going to cost you maybe $100, but when you're there, you're on holiday, Monopoly money kind of. But I've heard people saying, like, I have friends actually who stayed at Luxor and said the rooms were quite old-fashioned, and they said it wasn't as grand when they got into it.
Okay, that's
they liked
interesting.
The hotel, but the actual room, they weren't that impressed with the decor and stuff like that. But they said they walked to the Rio to see Penn and Teller.
Right.
And when they got there, the girl was like, they were dripping in sweat. The receptionist was like, hey, where you been today? Like, oh, we've walked here from the Luxor. And the receptionist was like, do not do that. Get a taxi. And she was like, to be honest, we're skinflint and Scottish, so we're used to walking places. It's fine. She was like, do not walk, because I don't know if the Rio's quite far out or something.
Right.
So my friend,
it's a little bit off the Strip, so I can get
Penn and Teller, and she was like, no, the receptionist was like, for your safety, get a taxi home tonight.
Yes.
Is that something that you heard or seen or were a part of? You did a lot of walking?
Maybe it's good to clarify at that point what you think she meant by safety. Was this for the sake of the weather and the heat, or was this for personal safety?
Personal safety,
dodgy characters
walking
in
home
town.
at night.
Right.
Was a kind of the hint, I think.
Yeah, I think I mean that's a sensible thing to do in any city that's not your own and that you don't know well. So that wasn't something that we that was impressed upon us that was particular to Vegas. Right. To answer this from your original question, we did walk a lot up and down the Strip, but in that heat at that time of year, you don't walk up and down the Strip in a straight line. Right. You zigzag in and out of the hotels. Yeah. You catch that sweet aircon and stop for a Coke or whatever.
That's literally the exact phrase I've heard from everyone is you dip into hotels.
You dip in and out, you zigzag in and out, You will rarely, if ever, unless you go later in the year, be able to do that in one fell swoop. Temperature's one reason for that. The other is just the sheer distance. Yeah. It is a few miles long. I can't remember exactly, but the one day that we done it end to end, the main part of the strip, and there's a reason I'm calling it that, is that took us the best part of the day between going in and out of hotels and stopping off at shops and things like that and seeing the different hotels. It can take you the full day to do that. So it is quite an endurance test if you're going for the full walk. Yeah, the buses, the trams, the taxis, they're all fairly reasonable if you can't be asked or you need to get somewhere quickly. Definitely go for that. But I wouldn't place all your time travelling around in the cabs and stuff. There's a lot of pleasure to be had from walking up and down the strip. A lot of weird and wonderful folks dressed up on the strip as well to attract you into the hotels, which is part of the cool spectacle. I've said main strip a few times, and walking up and down it, that was the reason for saying that. The other reason for it was, and I really did not appreciate this before going to Vegas, the old classic Vegas that you hear a lot about.
It's the Golden Nugget.
The Golden Nugget and that sort of thing, right. Yeah.
Good
and the sort of, the cowboy thing. And I remember seeing it in Honey, I Blew Up the Kid.
Yeah.
And seeing it in that. I thought that was part of the main strip, as I've been calling it. It's not. It's part of the original Vegas strip, which is actually quite far away from the main strip that all these hotels that we've been talking about and all these theatre shows that we've been talking about are actually on. That was the one genuine case where it was, get a cab out there or get the tram out there or whatever and dedicate the time to being in that old part. Get time out there either in the morning or get a cab out there early in the evening so you can spend the part of your day walking around there and see those more classical sites that are removed from the main strip and you wouldn't think about before going to Vegas necessarily. The other cool part about that is that in the old movies that you'll see that strip, it doesn't look the same anymore because they've pumped the steroids into it like they have in other parts of Vegas, and where it was once open like a strip, it's now got this sort of dome-shaped cover going from building to building that's got sort of LCD screens and TVs embedded into it again, so there's another assault on the senses. And another weird and wonderful thing about it was just walking down that classic part of Vegas, all of a sudden people come streaming over your head because they've got the sort of, what do you call it?
Like a zip line?
Like a zip line, exactly, like a Foxwire zip line running horizontally right down the road. So you can just go up the stairs in this part of Vegas, pay $50 or whatever it is and just get fired on a zip line right down the road. So another, why the hell wouldn't you? Like, you feel like you're in some sort of drug-induced dream when you're in Vegas, and that was another part of it.
How, this is, I keep on, you're answering questions I haven't asked and giving me more. So I've had loads of folk talk, or not loads, a few have mentioned the old strip, but quite a few of them, and maybe this is bordering into stereotyping territory, but a lot of the women I've spoken to have said the old town they found to be quite sleazy.
Absolutely.
Which is, you've spoke very positively, talked about the classy end of it, but you would totally agree with that as well?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. I'm talking positively because I've got a lot of good memories of being there, and it's, for most folks, it is a one-time thing. You're seeing all this strange shit that you're just never going to see anywhere else, and I keep saying it's like a town on steroids. You feel like you're on drugs even if you never have been, and it's an assault on the senses, another thing I've kept saying, but there is no getting away from it. A lot of that part of Vegas is like an exaggerated version of Blackpool. Right. If there's anyone listening who doesn't know what Blackpool is, that's the UK's answers to Vegas. And it's got a sort of miniature Eiffel Tower monument in the centre of it. There's a lot of trams and attractions and illuminations and lights, and sort of a classic theatrical feel to it, a little bit like Vegas. But that old part of Vegas that you're saying people have described as sleazy, I can see that because a lot of maybe lower end sort of casinos, a lot of places that have been around for a long time, a lot more street entertainment. Right. I'm trying to think, you know, it's hard to describe. There's a lot of these things where you get the feeling of it and then putting it into words is quite difficult. How else would you describe it as being sleazy, or why is it different from the main strip? The main strip's a lot more polished. Right. And because it's bigger, you can get more people on it without it feeling as crowded. Okay. The old part of Vegas is a lot more condensed in its size, and it can feel a lot more crowded and crammed. Okay. And I guess thinking about the sorts of casinos I've seen in that part of Vegas, you know, those sort of dingy amusements centres you get going through the town of a city.
Threadbare carpet sort of thing.
Threadbare carpets. You can hear the bingo announcer from the outside through the crackly microphone. You can see the beginnings of a dilapidated old puggy, and it's just wall to wall with them. It was more like that sort of thing out there than it was the grand and gold lined spiral staircase casinos that you saw in the main part. So it was a little bit more, if you can use this word for Vegas, basic in comparison to the main part. So yeah, go to the old part of Vegas, take it with a pinch of salt. Cool. It's certainly worth seeing.
The next thing is, you've come back and forth. How did you deal with being a Scotsman in the desert? Like temperature-wise, weather-wise, it's obviously come up. You're about to rain. You're constantly for aircon.
Sure.
What was it realistically like? Like, how did you cope? Did you cope?
Not well. Right. Without repeating myself too much, walking up and down the strip, you do need to go in and out of the hotels for the aircon. I couldn't handle walking. Amanda's much better with the heat than I am, but I couldn't do it. A lot of people will feel as I did. You know, just take a 20-minute break, go for a Coke, go for a drink, and then go and walk for a bit again. But to bring this maybe to something else, I can tell people about one of the ways that I coped with it, that is another part of the really good memories, was spending at least a day by the poolside in your hotel of choice. Because that was another sort of, you felt like you were falling into a sort of an American teen movie that we might have grown up with. The day that we chose to spend by the pool was either a Friday or a Saturday. It was one of the weekend days, and that's when we learned something else about Vegas. A lot of folks from out of town in the Midwest will come to Vegas just for the weekend. Okay. You know, you spend so much time planning to go to Vegas from the UK, you forget that there's a lot of people nearby in the States who'll just come there to blow off some steam in the weekend. And so the pool was relatively busy but manageable during the week, but it was like a party zone at the weekend. Right. You know, it doubled. It's like Edinburgh during the fringe. It doubles in population almost. So I coped with the heat, and Amanda wanted to bathe in the heat by spending one day by the pool. I could stand in the pool, float around, you know, keep the sun cream on and all of that, but stay cool that way and chill out for the day. Because that was one of those rare experiences where you could just be standing in the pool, talking to some stranger who likes your accent and is telling you about why they're there just to get pissed drunk for the weekend, what they do with their life. And then someone comes by and asks if you want a beer, if you want a cocktail. So standing in a relatively shallow bit of the pool just for my own safety, and got nice and merry over the course of a few cocktails, staying cool in the pool, getting drunk in the process, chilling out and seeing all of these Americans coming from out of town to enjoy the weekend. And just getting to know people that you'll never see again.
So see, and this is where this is what I'm really here for, is realistically things like, if you're sitting in a pool drinking, are you paying for those drinks? Do you run up a tab? Is it free? Do you have money on you? Because if you're standing in a pool, your wallet's soaking. Like, this is the kind of the nitty gritty what I'm wondering about.
So the obvious answer to the wallet situation was we had sunbeds right next to the pool, so that wasn't an issue. You can run up a tab. You know, I bought a few drinks on tab and then paid for it at the end. It's probably hotel dependent, but it was chilled out enough that I could order it. The same person would come back later and ask if you want something else. You could put it on your room and things like that, or you could just pay for it at the end. But it's in their best interest to keep you chilled, right? I mean, if you go into the casinos, the one thing you'll hear about before going to Vegas, more likely than not, is that you get free drinks when you're in the casino. And many of the casinos were indeed like that. You would get a free beer or a free cocktail or whatever, just to keep you pulling on the one-armed bandit, you know, to keep you at the roulette table and what have you. So I think I maybe got one free drink in the pool and then I was paying for it. But it wasn't unreasonable. You know, if you are walking around Vegas a lot, if you are spending a lot of time in that heat, it is good to take probably one day and just chill out. And maybe other people listening to this will spend most of their time doing that, and 1 or 2 days out doing theatre stuff or whatever, and that's cool as well. But I'm so glad I've done at least one day of just chilling out, staying cool by the pool and getting a little bit drunk in the process.
See, that's what I'm looking forward to. Across the board, how did you find food and drink expense-wise? Because again, I've heard so many conflicting things. That's going to get into my next question as well. But like in terms of like, obviously going to nice restaurants and things, or eating in hotels. And
So I mean, the price thing is always going to be subjective. I think it's actually a waste of time talking about it, because every couple or friend that you meet, they're going to have different budgets. Everyone's got a different way of life, different job, different salary. So it's budgeting for what you can afford. What's more interesting and informative to chat about is what you can expect from the food, which is go big or go the fuck home. It was absolutely ridiculous. Like, you can see why, more seriously, there's an obesity problem out in the States. The first breakfast we had in the Monte Carlo the day after we got there was pancakes. You know, so you'll go down, you'll get, you know, bacon and maple syrup, or order something like that, or, you know, a more solidly sweet pancake, expecting that we might get a few you know, tea plate size pancakes and the sides that go along with it, not expecting 3 dinner plate size pancakes stacked one on top of the other about an inch thick to come out to the table with a litre of maple syrup and a tent size amount of bacon wrapped over the top of it. I think I ate a quarter of it. You know, it was just impenetrable in terms of the size. So utterly indulgent, bloody delicious, really enjoyable, not sustainable.
No.
How
do
the other
you
thing,
cope with that, like eating and then having to obviously walk for periods of time and having a meal and?
It's an easy thing. Just be sensible about it. You know, if you're going to a restaurant, if you're going to have big pancakes, chill out and enjoy the restaurant for a bit. One of the other we went to one of Gordon Ramsay's many restaurants just to get a decent burger in one of his burger places that's in one of the casinos. He's got a nice steak restaurant as well. Go there, enjoy the food, enjoy the bloody restaurant as well, because a lot of these things are as spectacular as the theatre shows we've been talking about. So just take it in. But in terms of the size of the food, we would often find ourselves just having one meal a day. You know, it was that substantial, and you were that warm from walking around. You probably wouldn't eat as much as you would back home, especially here in the UK and in Scotland. So that was more than comfortable for us from that point of view. Chicken wings were great. You know, chicken wings the size of actual chickens. You know, deep fried, crispy, again indulgent. You know that you're taking it at least a year off your life just by having it.
100%, yeah.
But look, how did we start this conversation? You're talking about budgeting for a trip that you might never do again. Go for it. Go for that limo ride. Go for the food that might not be great for you. Go for that show that you might never have gone to see back home. It is a good, maybe to summarise everything I've said so far, it's a good excuse to just, to be frank, say fuck it, let's go for it. Because we might never do it again. Vegas is a good stage to do that on.
Excellent. I think that's pretty much summed up all that I'd have to ask about it. Hopefully I'll take a lot of your advice on board, and hopefully I'll see things and go, he did this, I'll try that instead, so we can have a more comparison kind of look back at it.
Definitely looking forward to that. This will be the first time we've had a chance to do one episode in preparation, and then when you come back from Vegas, I'm looking forward to interviewing you and finding out just how much of what I said rang true and what you discovered for yourself.
And also how things have changed. I mean, it's what, 4 years since you were
4
there?
years, yeah, 4 solid years.
Things I've heard about, like for example, the Stratosphere has like a theme park on top of it. You were saying there was a lot of building sites. I wonder if I do that same walk. Is it survivable now? Could I have done it in the rain?
Exactly,
I need to look at the map and see what you did and see if we could get a comparison. The last thing I want to ask is, because my barber said this to me, as a regret, And it kind of blew my mind, but my partner's really into getting photographs of things. Did you go to get a photo at the Las Vegas sign? The famous Welcome to Las Vegas sign?
No. A partial regret. We got a sort of fake version of that when we went to the Madame Tussauds waxworks that's in Vegas.
Okay.
If we had to go back, yeah, I would probably go to the sign.
Okay.
You do remind me of something else I should mention. So if you want to go to the sign, again, plan some time for it. Mm-hmm. It's not right on the strip. It's a little bit of a drive out.
Right, okay.
Welcoming people into Vegas. Mm-hmm. So if you want that, if that's a big box for you to tick,
yes.
Plan for it.
Okay.
The other thing we planned for and booked as soon as we got there was a day, not in Nevada, not in Vegas, but in Arizona for the Grand Canyon.
Right. I love how we've wrapped this up and now we're not. Yeah. Because I have quite a big bugbear about this, okay? I'm not that game for it.
Yeah.
Right.
And this is a good point to make because it's not for everyone.
I think it's amazing. I would love to see it. Yeah. In my opinion, I think we could do the West Coast of America later and drive over and see it, and it's grand. For sure. This is my opinion based. Like we've got essentially 6 days in Vegas with flights and stuff.
Yeah, that was roughly the same time as we had.
I think the options seem to me to be a day almost on a bus or getting a car out and driving through the desert for hours and hours, essentially what would be like driving to London or something like that. Seeing it, which you can't really see the grandeur of it from the ground because it's a massive canyon. Yeah. Or a very, very expensive helicopter ride where you fly out, you get an amazing view of it, you stop on the ground for a bit and fly back. It's less time, but much more money. Mm-hmm. The other option I've heard about is you can go to the Hoover Dam. Now, my girlfriend really wants to see the Grand Canyon, right? And usually I'm the one who's into boring things. But then I'm like, however, this massive work of engineering brilliance, I'd be game for that, and she's less game for that. Did you do the Grand Canyon?
We did the Grand Canyon. So you're right, there's several ways you can do it. Mm-hmm. We did, so again, for us, we are quite fond of hiking. So the way that we did it was to get a bus trip out there and walk around part of the perimeter of it. So we were, again, if you like, on the edge of the canyon, looking down into it and doing a hike around it and seeing it that way, and seeing some of the Native American Indian settlements that were nearby and being able to chat to some of them and interact with them a bit. Okay. For me, like the hiking part was one thing from it. The other part was, as Amanda will tell you, with the shake of a head, I'm snap happy, like a bit of photography, being able to set up the camera and do that from the side of the canyon, looking out into something that's hard to wrap your head around, and the expanse of it was amazing for me. I'm glad we did it that way. That was for us. That was our flavour. We loved it. We've got a photo up in our living room now that's both of us standing at the edge of it, which is a funny story behind it because the person who took the photograph of us standing in front of the canyon with that in the background was an ex-army veteran, quite a big, bulky guy, very macho, was there with his family. It was really nice to see. We spoke to them about where we were from, where they were coming from. But when he took the camera to take our photograph, he did that and then said, guys, would you take one of us? And his family got set up at the canyon. And as he passed the camera to us and walked over to his family, he pretended to stumble as if he was going to fall into it. And my heart fell from my chest to my arse, and I nearly lost it. So that was a bit of sordid humour on the edge of it. So if you're afraid of heights, watch out because they will be tested at that part. If I had to go back, I would go down into the Colorado River. So you can, I think you can get a boat down it or kayak it or something like that and be in the canyon looking up. That is the other way I'd love to do that.
Was that a full day trip for you then?
Full day trip. So if folks want to do it, know that you're essentially giving a day to go to the canyon, go to Arizona. Our mentality was we didn't really know when we would be back in the States, especially in the States together. I go for work and stuff, which is all right, but it's no honeymoon, it's no trip to the States. So we knew that we weren't going to be back anytime soon, so we made damn sure we were going to do it. If there's others out there who think they might be back and want to do the trip across the Midwest and plan for it on a separate trip, I think that's equally as valid. but whether it's going to see the sign or going out to the Grand Canyon as part of your trip around Vegas, then both of those should be planned for in advance. But yeah, summarising again, man, it's one of the highlights of our time together as a couple. One of the best things I've done in my life. Utterly surreal, utterly unique, singular, weird, wonderful, and an assault on the senses in every possible magical way.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, hopefully it'll be good to catch up and see how it goes.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Cheers.